By keeping a duplicate of any machine they sent into space, they could troubleshoot a malfunctioning component while its counterpart was thousands of miles away. These twins evolved into computer simulations, digital twins.
At the time of initial reports on the program, there were only 62 country-level simulations being run by the US Department of Defense. These simulations grouped humans into composites, with 100 individuals acting as
and I just, that was obviously a communist buzzword and didn't have any real meaning. But do you know when the first military intervention by this country was in Nicaragua?
In the 19th century sometime.
1855. William Walker, with backing from New England states, went down militarily and
as a single node. But already at that time, the US Army had used the systems to create a one-to-one level simulation of potential Army recruits.
It's the stuff of a Hollywood movie, but a group of veterans has filed a lawsuit against the CIA and US Army claiming that the government planted remote-controlled devices in their brains. The claims relate to a government program at the US Army's Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland.
The ultimate aim would be to
the People's Movement and the Liberal Party. The campesinos had an uprising in 1881, 1898, 1909 we put in the U.S. Marines to stop a people's uprising.
And they stayed there for what,
28 years? 28 years. In 19...
archive enough data on each individual to be able to make a computer model of everyone on the planet.
We have to embody all our data and all our knowledge into a working model. It's like a Noah's Ark, it's like an archive.
It's a very important thing that we create models.
In 1933, the Congress finally voted to get the Marines out. There was that famous photograph, we could dig it up and you could show it here, of a Marine captain holding the guy's head, and a Sandinista's head in his hand. There was an uprising in this country, a reaction, and they forced the Marines to come home. The Congress voted, and they created an...
of the world inside our heads, and everything you think, everything. From your feeling of self, to the feeling that you may have a soul or a maker, to your preference for cilantro or not, all of those things live inside a place which is dark.
Before they left, and the commander of the National Guard became a dictator. When he left the country, when he was forced to flee, he took $1.6 billion with him from a poor country. This compares
small and never sees the outside world. When we look through our eyes, there are photons hitting the outside of our face. They don't actually make it into the part that thinks. The part that thinks is looking at something else. It's looking at some kind of weird compressed signal.
The brain builds a version of
with the $4.2 billion that our man, the CIA's man, has stolen from Zaire. a poor country, the national debt is $4.5 billion, and the $16 billion that the Shah was permitted to steal from Iran.
There's another point I want to highlight here, a historical point, and that is that Sandino,
the universe, and projects this version of the universe like a bubble all around us. If you zoom in onto the surface of the neocortex, you discover that it's made up of little modules, G5 processors like in a computer, but there's about a million.
The Sandinista movement were, as you pointed out, not communists. They were democratic nationalists who were opposed from the beginning by the Communist Party in Nicaragua, similar to Cuba, where Fidel was another democratic nationalist who was criticized constantly.
A million of them. They were so successful in evolution that what we did was to duplicate them over and over and add more and more of them to the brain until we ran out of space in the skull and the brain started to fold in on itself. And that's why the neocortex is so highly convoluted. We were just packing in columns so that we'd have more neocortical columns to perform more complex.
By the Cuban Communist Party.
Absolutely.
And you also have the same thing happening after both the Cuban and the Nicaraguan revolutions vis-a-vis the American government. That is, after the Cuban Revolution, Fidel sent some of his people to Washington.
Oh, he came himself.
Right.
Yeah, Fidel.
Functions. So you can think of the neocortex actually as a massive grand piano, million-key grand piano. Each of these neocortical columns would produce a note. You stimulate it, it produces a symphony. But it's not just a symphony.
And look, we want to be friends, we want to have good relationships, etc. And the Sandinistas did the same thing. They said that, look, we want to start working with Washington, we want to become friends with America. And both times they were rebuffed, pushed back, and then the only place that would give them any aid whatsoever is the Soviet Union, who gave the Cubans oil and some
of perception. It's a symphony of your universe, your reality. So the holy grail for neuroscience is really to understand the design of the neocortical column. And it's not just for neuroscience, it's perhaps to understand perception, to understand.
economic.
Well, the Soviet Union has bought Cuban sugar, and but the Sandinistas have not gotten a dominant amount of aid from the Soviet Union. Very little. They've been bailed out by Western European countries mostly.
That's a good point. But in any case, the fact that America has failed to establish satisfactory
and reality.
The computer simulation acts as a technological afterlife. One negative aspect to this is that because you are directly tethered to your digital twin, you can be controlled through the simulation. This is how targeted individuals are manipulated.
By the way, I could build, I think, a soul. Here's how I would do it. I copy you exactly into a digital.
relationships with these countries pushes them towards diplomatic relations with other countries, then we complain that they're on the side of our enemies or they're communists or whatever. And this is just moronic, really.
You know, the
environment. Everything about you. Imagine that was possible. It probably is. So if I copy you into a machine, that copy process has all of the properties we were talking about as being a soul. First of all, it's immaterial, because copying, that's not...
I can explain something to you that I doubt if anyone has ever explained to you. You know, the domino theory. People say it works, people say it's bullshit, you know, and back and forth, and yet countries seem to be falling. And the point is,
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it. Write for Pollution Booklet, Box 1771, Radio City Station, New York.
Very